Whoa, 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 wake up with wake.
I know. I saw it work in my own life. Ask and it shall be given you. Seek and ye shall find. Knock and it shall be opened unto you. When Mrs. L.G. Baird of Highland, Illinois was faced with stark tragedy, she discovered that she could find peace and tranquility by kneeling down and saying, O Lord, thy will, not mine, be done. One evening our telephone rang, she writes in a letter that I have before me now. It rang 14 times before I had the courage to pick up the receiver. I knew it must be the hospital, and I was terrified. I feared that our little boy was dying. He had meningitis. He had already been given penicillin, but it made his temperature fluctuate, and the doctors feared that the disease had traveled to his brain and might cause the development of a brain tumor and death. The phone call was just what I feared. The hospital was calling. The doctor wanted us to come immediately. Maybe you can picture the anguish my husband and I went through sitting in the waiting room. Everyone else had his baby, but we sat there with empty arms, wondering if we would ever hold our little fellow again. When we were finally called into the doctor's private office, the expression on his face filled our hearts with terror. His words brought even more terror. He told us that there was only one chance in 4 that our baby would live. He said that if we knew another doctor, to please call him in on the case. On the way home, my husband broke down and, doubling up his fist, hit the steering wheel, saying, Bets, I can't give that little guy up. Have you ever seen a man cry? It isn't a pleasant experience. We stopped the car, and after talking things over, decided to stop in church and pray that if it was God's will to take our baby, we would resign our will to his. I sank in the pew and said with tears rolling down my cheeks, Not my will, but thine be done. The moment I uttered those words, I felt better. A sense of peace that I hadn't felt for a long time came over me. All the way home, I kept repeating, O God, thy will, not mine, be done. I slept soundly that night for the first time in a week. The doctor called a few days later and said that Bobby had passed the crisis. I thank God for the strong and healthy 4-year-old boy we have today. I know men who regard religion as something for women and children and preachers. They pride themselves on being he-men who can fight their battles alone. How surprised they might be to learn that some of the most famous he-men in the world pray every day. For example, he-man Jack Dempsey told me that he never went to bed without saying his prayers. He told me that he never ate a meal without first thanking God for it. He told me that he prayed every day when he was training for a bout, and that when he was fighting, he always prayed just before the bell sounded for each round. Praying, he said, helped me fight with courage and confidence. He-man Connie Mack told me he couldn't go to sleep without saying his prayers. He-man Eddie Reckenbacker told me that he believed his life had been saved by prayer. He prayed every day. He-man Edward R. Stettinius, former high official of General Motors and United States Steel and former Secretary of State, told me that he prayed for wisdom and guidance every morning and night. He-man J. Pierpont Morgan, the greatest financier of his age, often went alone to Trinity Church at the head of Wall Street on Saturday afternoons and knelt in prayer. When He-man Eisenhower flew to England to take supreme command of the British and American forces, he took only one book on the plane with him, the Bible. He-man General Mark Clark told me that he'd read his Bible every day during the war and knelt down in prayer. So did Chiang Kai-shek and General Montgomery, Monty of El Alamein. So did Lord Nelson at Trafalgar. So did General Washington, Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson, and scores of other great military leaders. These he-men discovered the truth of William James's statement, we and God have business with each other, and in opening ourselves to his influence, our deepest destiny is fulfilled. A lot of he-men are discovering that. 72 million Americans are church members now, an all-time record. As I said before, even the scientists are turning to religion. Take, for example, Dr. Alexis Carrel, who wrote Man the Unknown, and won the greatest honor that can be bestowed upon any scientist, the Nobel Prize. Dr. Carrel said in a Reader's Digest article, "Prayer is the most powerful form of energy one can generate. It is a force as real as gravity." As a physician, I have seen men, after all other therapy had failed, lifted out of disease and melancholy by the serene effort of prayer. Prayer, like radium, is a source of luminous, self-generating energy. In prayer, human beings seek to augment their finite energy by addressing themselves to the infinite source of all energy. When we pray, we link ourselves with the inexhaustible motive power that spins the universe. We pray that a part of this power be apportioned to our needs. Even in asking, our human deficiencies are filled and we arise strengthened and repaired. Whenever we address God in fervent prayer, we change both soul and body for the better. It could not happen that any man or woman could pray for a single moment without some good result. Admiral Byrd knew what it meant to link ourselves with the inexhaustible motive power that spins the universe. His ability to do that pulled him through the most trying ordeal of his life. He tells the story in his book, Alone. In 1934, he spent 5 months in a hut buried beneath the ice cap of the Ross Barrier, deep in the Antarctic. He was the only living creature south of latitude 78. Blizzards roared above his shack. The cold plunged down to 82 degrees below zero. He was completely surrounded by unending night. And then he found, to his horror, he was being slowly poisoned by carbon monoxide that escaped from his stove. What could he do? The nearest help was 123 miles away and could not possibly reach him for several months. He tried to fix his stove and ventilating system, but the fumes still escaped. They often knocked him out cold. He lay on the floor completely unconscious. He couldn't eat. He couldn't sleep. He became so feeble that he could hardly leave his bunk. He frequently feared he wouldn't live until morning. He was convinced he would die in that cabin, and his body would be hidden by perpetual snows. What saved his life? One day, in the depths of his despair, he reached for his diary and tried to set down his philosophy of life. The human race, he wrote, is not alone in the universe. He thought of the stars overhead, of the orderly swing of the constellations and planets, of how the everlasting sun would, in its time, return to lighten even the wastes of the south polar regions. And then he wrote in his diary, "I am not alone." This realization that he was not alone, not even in a hole in the ice at the end of the earth, was what saved Richard Byrd. "I know it pulled me through," he says, and he goes on to add, "Few men in their lifetime come anywhere near exhausting the resources dwelling within them. There are deep wells of strength that are never used." Richard Byrd learned to tap those wells of strength and use those resources by turning to God. Glenn A. Arnold learned amidst the cornfields of Illinois the same lesson that Admiral Byrd learned in the polar ice cap. Mr. Arnold, an insurance broker in Chillicothe, Illinois, opened his speech on conquering worry like this. 8 years ago, I turned the key in the lock of my front door for what I believed was the last time in my life. Then I climbed in my car and started down for the river. I was a failure," he said. 1 month before, my entire little world had come crashing down on my head. My electrical appliance business had gone on the rocks. In my home, my mother lay at the point of death. My wife was carrying our second child. Doctor's bills were mounting. We'd mortgaged everything we had to start the business, our car and our furniture. I'd even taken out a loan on my insurance policies. Now everything was gone. I couldn't take it any longer, so I climbed into my car and started for the river, determined to end the sorry mess. I drove a few miles out in the country, pulled off the road, and got out and sat on the ground and wept like a child. Then I really started to think. Instead of going around in frightening circles of worry, I tried to think constructively. How bad was my situation? Couldn't it be worse? Was it really hopeless? What could I do to make it better? I decided then and there to take the whole small problem to the Lord and ask Him to handle it. I prayed. I prayed hard. I prayed as though my very life depended on it, which in fact it did. Then a strange thing happened. As soon as I turned all my problems over to a power greater than myself, I immediately felt a peace of mind that I hadn't known in months. I must have sat there for half an hour, weeping and praying. Then I went home and slept like a child. The next morning, I arose with confidence. I no longer had anything to fear, for I was depending on God for guidance. That morning, I walked into a local department store with my head high, and I spoke with confidence as I applied for a job as salesman in the electrical appliance department. I knew I would get the job, and I did. I made good at it until the whole appliance business collapsed due to the war. Then I began selling life insurance, still under the management of my great guide. That was only 5 years ago. Now all of my bills are paid. I have a fine family of 3 bright children, own my own home, have a new car, and own $25,000 in life insurance. As I look back, I'm glad now that I lost everything and became so depressed that I started for the river, because that tragedy taught me to rely on God, and I now have a peace and confidence that I never dreamed were possible. Why does religious faith bring us such peace and calm and fortitude? I'll let William James answer that. He says, "The turbulent billows of the fretful surface leave the deep parts of the ocean undisturbed. And to him who has a hold on vaster and more permanent realities, the hourly vicissitudes of his personal destiny seem relatively insignificant things. The really religious person is accordingly unshakable and full of equanimity and calmly ready for any duty that the day may bring forth." And anxious, why not try God? Why not, as Immanuel Kant said, accept a belief in God because we need such a belief? Why not link ourselves now with the inexhaustible motive power that spins the universe? Even if you're not a religious person by nature or training, even if you're an out-and-out skeptic, prayer can help you much more than you believe, for it is a practical thing. What do I mean, practical? I mean that prayer fulfills these 3 very basic psychological needs which all people share, whether they believe in God or not. 1, prayer helps us put into words exactly what is troubling us. We saw in chapter 4 that it's almost impossible to deal with a problem while it remains vague and nebulous. Praying, in a way, is very much like writing our problems down on paper. If we ask help for a problem, even from God, we must put it into words. 2, prayer gives us a sense of sharing our burdens, of not being alone. Few of us are so strong that we can bear our heaviest burdens, our most agonizing troubles, all by ourselves. Sometimes our worries are of so intimate a nature that we cannot discuss them, even with our closest relatives or friends. Then prayer is the answer. Any psychiatrist will tell us that when we're pent up and tense and in agony of spirit, it is therapeutically good to tell someone our troubles. When we can't tell anyone else, we can always tell God. 3, prayer puts into force an active principle of doing. It's the first step toward action. I doubt if anyone can pray for some fulfillment day after day without benefiting from it. In other words, without taking some steps to bring it to pass. And the world-famous scientist, Dr. Alexis Carrel, said, prayer is the most powerful form of energy one can generate. So why not make use of it? Call it God or Allah or Spirit. Why quarrel with the definitions as long as the mysterious powers of nature take us in hand? Why not close this book right now? Shut the door, kneel down, and unburden your heart. If you've lost your faith, beseech Almighty God to renew it. And repeat this beautiful prayer written by St. Francis of Assisi 700 years ago. Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life.
Happen, but it could completely. The story we tell ourselves is how we perceive the world. And so then when we create the difficulties in our life, it reaffirms the belief that life is hard, that it's really someone out there that's doing it to us, that it's the circumstance in the past that created this. Okay, let's take away the person that did it. Let's shoot him to the moon. Let's erase your past. Now, what are you going to do now? You still got to do something, right? You're still alive, and I say we already know how to do this. We already know how to do this. We're wired to be creators. We're wired to do this. The thing that stops us, for the most part, in doing it is really the hormones of stress, because living in stress constantly is living in survival. Living in survival is living in emergency. In an emergency, it's not a time to create. In an emergency, it's not a time to open your heart. It's not a time to learn. It's not even a time to sit still. So most people then that are living in stress and living in survival, they can't believe in a future yet because it's not a time to create. So getting people to that point where they make up their mind, and they make up their mind enough to begin to think, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be something else. That awakening process typically happens when people reach their lowest denominator. They hit rock bottom, because then they can see themselves through the eyes of somebody else. You feel so altered, you're not returning any texts. You feel so altered, you want to go to dinner with your buddies. You feel so altered, you don't want to watch your favorite TV show. You're just disconnected. And that's when you start observing yourself. But my message is, why wait for that?
I am procrastinating pretty hard today. My brain is just not kicking into gear.
I mean, you could learn and change in pain and suffering, or you can learn and change in joy and inspiration. If you're waking up every morning being defined by a vision of the future instead of the memories of the past, and you get up and you're inspired from an elevated self now instead of a limited self, you could observe the old self from an elevated state instead of that diminished state, and people are doing that. So they are aware of those thoughts. And yes, it takes effort, and if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. But just because you have a thought doesn't necessarily mean it's true. And when you start looking and observing those thoughts, I think you are like Gandalf, because Gandalf also said, you may not pass, and he meant like that kind of severity when it comes to how we make up our mind about things. That's the kind of energy or intention that begins to create the biggest volume of change in our life. Getting beyond our body, our environment, and time isn't easy, but it's worth it, because once we disconnect from three-dimensional reality, we enter a whole other reality called the quantum, the realm of infinite possibility. Describing this reality is a bit challenging because it's unlike anything we are familiar with in the physical universe. The rules of Newtonian physics, the way we are used to thinking the world works, simply don't apply. The quantum, or unified, field is an invisible field of energy and information, or you could say a field of intelligence or consciousness that exists beyond space and time. Nothing physical or material exists there. It's beyond anything you can perceive with your senses. This unified field of energy and information is what governs all the laws of nature. Scientists have been working to quantify this process so we can more fully understand it, and they are discovering more and more all the time. Based on my knowledge and experience, I believe there's a self-organizing intelligence that is energy and is observing all of the universes and galaxies into order. Sometimes people will say to me that this idea seems a bit unscientific. I always answer them with the same question. What happens after an explosion? Order or disorder? Their answer is always that disorder results. Then I ask, so why after the Big Bang, which was the biggest explosion ever, has so much order been created? Some intelligence must be organizing its energy and matter into form and unifying all the forces of nature to create such a masterpiece. That intelligence, that energy, is the quantum or unified field. To give you some idea of what this field is like, imagine taking away all the people and bodies on Earth, all the animals and plants and physical objects, both natural and man-made, all the continents, the oceans, and even the Earth itself. Imagine you could then take away all the planets and moons and stars in our solar system, including our sun. And then imagine taking away all the other solar systems in our galaxy, and then all the galaxies in the universe. There's no air, and there isn't even any light that you can see with your eyes. There's just absolute blackness, the void, the zero point field. It's important to remember this, because when you as a consciousness in the present moment unfold into the unified field, you will be in an infinite black space, void of anything physical. Now imagine that not only do you not see anything here, but because you enter into this realm without a physical body, you also have no sight with which to see, nor do you have the capacity to hear, feel, smell, or taste. You have no senses here at all. The only way you can exist in the quantum is as an awareness, or better said, the only way you can experience this realm is with your awareness, not your senses. And since consciousness is awareness, and awareness is paying attention and noticing, once you are beyond the world of the senses, when you pay attention to the energy of the quantum field, your consciousness is connecting to greater levels of frequency and information. Yet as strange as this may sound, the quantum field is not empty. It's an infinite field filled with frequency or energy. And all frequency carries information. So think of the quantum field as being filled with infinite amounts of energy vibrating beyond the physical world of matter and beyond our senses. Invisible waves of energy available for us to use in creation. What exactly can we create with all this energy swimming in an infinite sea of potentials? That's up to us, because in short, the quantum field is the state in which all possibilities exist. And as I just said, when we find ourselves in the quantum universe, we exist simply as an awareness or as a consciousness. Specifically, an awareness that is paying attention to or observing a field of infinite possibilities existing within an even greater consciousness and a greater level of energy. As you enter this endless, vast space as an awareness, there are no bodies, no people, no objects, no places, and no time. Instead, infinite, unknown possibilities exist as energy. So if you find yourself thinking about knowns in your life, you are back in the three-dimensional reality of space and time. But if you can stay in the blackness of the unknown for long enough, it will prepare you to create unknowns in your life. When I was instructing you to return to the present moment, I was referring to you stopping yourself from thinking about the predictable future or from remembering the familiar past, and simply unfolding into this eternal vast space as an awareness. To no longer place your attention on anything or anyone material in this three-dimensional reality, like your body, the people in your life, the things you own, the places you go, and time itself. If you do that properly, you are nothing but awareness. That's how you get there. The journey back to source, the journey back to oneness, the journey back, everybody gets to, you can be anybody you want to be in three dimensions. You can be any character you want to be in the virtual reality experiences, the simulation that we're experiencing. But if you're living by the same emotions every day, or you can't get out of bed because you couldn't predict the feeling of everything that's going to happen in your life, then nothing is going to change until you change. And the discovery of, okay, so most people have to hit their lowest point in their life where nothing's making that feeling go away. And finally look at how they think, look at how they act, look at how they feel. My message is, why wait for that? And so what we're discovering is in 7 days, the science that we have is so compelling to show that in 7 days, there will be a host of biological changes that take place in a person's body to actually look like they're living in a new environment, living in a whole new life. So then, getting over yourself, to answer your question, is the difficulty. That's why people will say, it's too hard for me. But what they're really saying is, I don't believe in it. I really don't believe in it. Because if you believe in it, you got to show up. And if you don't believe in it, then you don't believe in yourself. And you don't believe in yourself, that means you don't believe in possibility. And if you don't believe in possibility, that means you can't believe in yourself. If you're viewing your life from the same level of mind every single day, anticipating a future based on your past, you are collapsing infinite fields of energy into the same patterns of information called your life. For example, if you wake up and you think, where's my pain? Your familiar pain soon appears because you expected it to be there. Imagine what would happen instead if you were able to take your attention off the physical world and the environment. When you take your attention off your body, you become no body, and you no longer have access to or any use for the senses. When you take your attention off the people in your life, you become no one. And so you no longer have an identity as a parent, a partner, a sibling, a friend, or even as a member of a profession, a religious group, a political party, or a nationality. You have no race, no gender, no sexual orientation, and no age. When you take your attention off objects and places in the physical environment, you are in no thing and nowhere. Finally, if you take your attention off linear time, which has a past and a future, you are in no time. You are in the present moment, in which all possibilities in the quantum field exist, because you are no longer identifying with or connected to the physical world. You are no longer trying to affect matter with matter. You are beyond matter and beyond how you identity yourself as a body in space and time. In a very real sense, you are in the immense blackness of the unified field where nothing material exists. That's the direct effect of continuously laboring to get to the present moment. The moment that happens, you unfold your attention and energy into an unknown field beyond matter where all possibilities exist. A field made up of nothing but invisible frequencies carrying information or consciousness. And just like the quantum scientists who took their attention off the electron only to find that it reverted to energy and possibility, if you were to take your attention off your life or get beyond the memory of your life should turn to possibility. After all, if you focus on the known, you get the known. If you focus on the unknown, you create a possibility. The longer you can linger in that field of infinite possibilities as an awareness, aware that you are aware in this endless black space, without putting your attention on your body, on things, or on people, places, and time, the longer you invest your energy into the unknown, the more you are going to create a new experience or new possibilities in your life. It's the law. When you're at a greater level of awareness, everything seems to be more connected. That's what the quantum is. So you're playing at that level. The synchronicities, the serendipities, the coincidences are actually informing you that you actually are creating your life. And that's the difference between being the victim of your life and being the creator of your life. Because when the environment is controlling the way we feel and the way we think, some person, some circumstance, some condition, what does that really mean? It means that person or circumstance is actually causing me to think and feel a certain way. And I don't think I have any control of it, then I must be victim to that circumstance, right? And that's a program, right? Yeah. So I realized in my own journey also that if I don't change my response to things in my life, I'll never change. So it's not that you respond. The question really is how long, right? So when you become aware that your environment is controlling how you think and feel, and your response changes, watch out, because now you no longer belong to the past. You actually belong to the future. So get a coherent heart. We know how to do that really well. Get a coherent brain. We can do that really well. Have people take all of their attention off the material world, off of everything known. Go from a convergent focus to a divergent focus. We got the data to prove that you keep putting your attention on nothing, on space, somehow the brain gets highly organized. So now, brain coherence, heart coherence, you synchronize your energy to whatever it is you want. And you got to sustain that state. You can't. We've had people that have healed themselves from Parkinson's disease, from cancers, from ALS, literally remission of the condition, and then have bad news. And in 1 hour driving to the hospital, all of their symptoms came back after being completely healed for 2 years. That's how strong those emotions are, right? So in your circumstance, right? I want people to have those moments where they have to literally choose, because I think when it's the hardest, it matters the most. Mm-hmm. That's what I think.
Cherish football on FanDuel before football Sundays are over.